Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm just trying to figure out right now how to hide the panels. But in principle, now you should hopefully see everything, including my cursor. So I was invited to talk about this paper, and I shamelessly used the opportunity to add two more. This paper, I mean, it was coordinated. They did a lot of really great work. Came out at the same time as ours, and I will later on um, discuss it and show some plots from that paper by Katrin Becker, Mariana Grania, and others. Um, and I should also say the paper I was invited to was done in collaboration with Anindya Sen-Gupta from Texas A&M and my student Muthuswamy Rajaguru. And the last but not least is a previous paper we did with Johannes Walcher, where we kind of laid the groundwork for all of this. It was also the three main papers, and fortunately, they will come really towards the end of the talk. Um, but I will either wake you up or maybe even manage to keep you interested all the way to there. Okay, that's in. Okay. So my mouse didn't work or my cursor. Um, yeah, I want to start with some kind of introduction, which kind of motivates me, the certain swampland conjectures, and then I want to give a brief review of type 2B flux compactification. Most people probably know it, but there's one important aspect that we kind of need for these Landau-Ginzburg models. And then in the second step, I will go through these Landau-Ginzburg constructions. And in the last step, I will review two explicit examples and the results there that I found extremely interesting. So it's an older slide I just recycled from previous talks, but I think it kind of summarizes the conundrum we are in. So on the one hand, we have seen a lot of constructions of different kind of flux vacuum and solutions in string theory, whether they're de Sitter, Minkowski, or ADS. Um, However, most of these have been called into question through the swampland program. And a lot of people have worked on this. There's no way to cite everybody. I mean, certain Arthur is here, Gary, I don't know, many other people, Max, who are here. I've worked on different aspects of this, and it's an ongoing project of kind of studying different constructions, analyzing their specific details, and seeing how they fit into the swampland program and the conjecture. Sometimes you have to refine the conjecture. Sometimes you have to like maybe give up on a model. Yeah, so for the sitter, I guess is highly debated. For 4D Minkowski vacuum, there is a conjecture or multiple conjectures that essentially say you should have massless scalar fields. This is extremely relevant to this talk today because we kind of present Minkowski vacuum without massless scalar fields. So would be somewhat in tension with this paper. This paper was careful enough to say um, this applies only to supergravity, and we will not be in a standard supergravity limit. We will be in a very different corner of the string landscape. So that wouldn't be a contradiction here to David Andreo's paper. Then the other issue also, there are no ADS vacua in string theory, or by ADS vacua, I mean something that is scale separated. So DJKT is under heavy debate. The Cornell group is constantly working on building new machinery, trying to find new vacua. It's an ongoing project of tremendous importance, I think, because um, if we just ask this very simple question in string phenomenology, uh, I think Arthur put that to me for the first time. Let's just compactify string theory to a lower dimension, could be four, but doesn't really have to four, and let's just find a vacuum. Um, and we don't really care what dimension, we don't really care about the SUSY. We just want an isolated vacuum without flat scalar fields, flat directions. Uh, Essentially, I think it's fair to say there's not a single example that the whole string phenomenology community agrees on either. They are kind of excluded by the swampland, leading to some tension there, or there might be other more detailed issues that haven't been worked out in these constructions.
Sorry,
But
can I quickly ask?
yes, absolutely, I love it. I just
What,
didn't manage what Arthur said to see people. Yes.
what about ADS 4 cross 7 in M theory? What are the scalars there?
Ah, so I I think so. I think you told me. So I think you told me about this example, right? Um, I think Kumrun said there are massless deformations, but I also would say, uh, is this is
There are
not a
like
4D,
scalars,
right?
they have like BF bound and stuff, but there's no marginal deformations in this case. So they're not
Um,
exactly massless scalars.
it's not scale separated.
Okay.
So uh, I didn't. So what I mean here by two lower dimensions is that you have truly a lower dimensional theory, which is scale separated. Uh, it's a very good question. So yeah, in ADS we usually don't get scale separation unless in DJKT, which of course Miguel then argued with Irene recently is non-supersymmetric, and there are other concerns about that. So uh, yeah, by lower dimensions, I mean truly I have a lower dimensional effective theory. Ideally, of course, four dimension, because we live in four dimension and our universe is described by a four dimensional effective field theory, and our universe seems to be in some kind of isolated vacuum. We don't have flat scalar fields. So I think it's a relatively minimum modest goal, but I think we don't have many or any examples as far as I know, but let me know. I'm also not like super eager and claiming, hey, I solved this. No, I will tell you a little bit about issues here in Minkowski and certainly not realistic. And there could be also a criticism of these constructions. I would be happy to hear criticism of those constructions. They're certainly not realistic. And if people have other examples, please let me know. Yeah. So I just think it's a very important topic that we need to address in string phenomenology. Um, most of these constructions so far work in the supergravity. At least I have been working there for the longest time of my life, and the last couple of years I switched a little bit. But we kind of search where we can search. Um, either we have large amounts of SUSY or we have large volume decoupling supergravity description. But here in this talk, one also goes a little bit away from that. One pays some price, but one also gets some insight about other parts. And also, of course, many other people have done this before. As I will say later, this is kind of built on previous paper by the Beckers and Buffer and Balch. Okay, so here just a real quick recap. Everybody knows, of course, type 2B flux compactifications. In principle, we can have F135 and H3, but for Calabi-Yau, we cannot have F1 and 3, so we just have the complexified G3 flux, which nicely incorporates the axiodilaton. So one of the moduli kind of appears already baked into the flux, and then the Gukov-Witten superpotential involves via G3 the tau, and via the holomorphic 3 form all the complex structure from A equals 1 to H2, 1. Um, the Kähler moduli, again, everybody knows, there's a no-scale structure. I want to spell it out here for one reason. So here, usually there are these T moduli that kind of absorb a dilaton factor. So I spelled out here a dilaton factor and then the volume of the internal space. That leads then to a prefactor that has this dilaton, but also the volume. And then here AB would run only over tau and the complex structure moduli. So the scalar potential only depends on the volume via an overall factor. And that leads to only Minkowski solutions as GKP told us, Giddings-Kaczor-Polchinski, that if you just take the derivative with respect to the volume, you find some kind of runaway, and this can only be zero if this term is zero, and that means you just solve these F-term equations for the axiodilaton and for the complex structure. So that gives then a Minkowski solution. The expectation then from Giddings-Kaczor-Polchinski and many people 20 years ago was, okay, we have H2, 1 plus 1 equations for the complex structure and the axiodilaton, and they will fix H2, 1 plus 1 scalars, and therefore we have solutions, our complex structure and the axiodilaton is fixed. At that point, then Kumrun and company thought, what about Kähler moduli? that is not KKLT. So KKLT then uses non-perturbative effects to stabilize, and an alternative proposed slightly later was to study flux compactifications that have no Kähler moduli at all. So there may be one or two more papers, but essentially it started in this paper where they said, okay, string theory doesn't really need a geometric space. We can study the full string theory. We don't need to go via the route of supergravity and the geometric compactifications. And
can I ask a quick question?
of course,
So the no scale structure, you expect corrections to it. So would you really have Minkowski in the end?
here,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Like wouldn't you expect like from higher-diff corrections or non-perturbative effects or something like that?
yeah. I mean, I thought there's even some extended no scale, wow, with corrections. I am not totally sure. I mean, I guess it depends.
I'm asking if there's so you're gonna find solutions which are Minkowski, but are you gonna find them in some approximation or?
No. So for if you ask whether Giddings-Kaczor-Porsinski Minkowski vacuum get some kind of runaway issue problem, I don't know. I mean, I guess there are always corrections. Here, I'm not totally sure whether these Minkowski vacuum survive. For mine, I will make a claim they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tim, I think
Yes.
they will survive if it's actually supersymmetric, which is not this condition. So if W is actually zero, then you can argue these exist, and they will not exist otherwise.
Okay, good. So I'm not totally sure. But yeah, I mean, we will also look for W0, DW0. Yes. But sorry. Yeah, very good. Just keep asking.
Sorry, maintaining W0 non-perturbatively seems to be difficult, right? Why would you
my
claim?
case, I will make the claim that you can do that, or I will
No,
just
I understand
repeat.
in your case, but in GKP case, I think W will generally have non-perturbative corrections at least, and so they will be a runaway.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I mean, I guess unless you control all the corrections non-perturbatively, right? The D3 or yeah, instantons or D-1 instantons, right? W could be non-zero, and then you're in trouble probably.
Yeah, Arthur, what Arthur says is completely right. The issue with GKP is even a perturbative construction doesn't work, let alone non-perturbative effects. But all of these have problems non-perturbatively in principle. Yeah.
Right, due to all these corrections. Yeah, okay, very good. If you find issues here in these constructions, please don't hesitate to tell me too. But I will get there in a little bit. So essentially,
excuse me.
Yes.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you return to the page of the book of Wi-Fi Witten particular potential?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the page. Next page. Next page. The next page. Can you turn to the
next page? Sorry.
Next page. Okay, that is this page. Okay, I have a question here. Here you use the e to the e to the power of the prefactor of the potential. You have a e to the power of k, and
Right.
here the k involves the two terms, the Kähler potential of the complex structure moduli and the Kähler potential of the Kähler moduli.
I forgot
And
e to the ks. I forgot here e to the kcs term. So this is e to the kk.
Yeah. I have a question. Why here you only consider the e to the power of kk, not the e to the power of kcs? Because I think in Krabbe manifold. Yeah, I think in Krabbe manifold we have the result that the integrate omega wedge omega bar equals to the integrate j wedge j. Oh, yeah.
That's a normalization condition, but I think here is normalized to 1. I think this is normalized to 1, but there would be a factor of e to the 1 over I mean, 1 over tau minus tau bar. But I think in these conventions, this is normalized to 1. Sometimes this is normalized to j where j. If I remember correctly here, I would suspect it's normalized to 1, but it's a choice. It could also be normalized to j where j, but I don't think so. I don't know. It's a good question, but I forgot it here. So there should be an e to the KCS.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, very good. So essentially, this was all revisited. And before I go through this work, so by people in Japan and Saclay and A&M, Heidelberg, I wanted to real quick review one conjecture, namely the tadpole conjecture. So naively, one thought that maybe this 1 plus h2, 1 equations would fix the 1 plus h2, 1 scalars. And when people actually work that out, in particular for models with many complex structure moduli, they usually found that doesn't really work. This is more like a question for a mathematician. Why could that really be? I don't know, but it has been checked by many people in many examples. So the tadpole conjecture says essentially if you want to really fix many complex structure and make them massive, then you need a large n-flux contribution to the fluxes. Oh, sorry, n-flux is the first term here, and then you have ND3. So in principle, this is a flux term. You somehow need to make that flux term large in concrete examples that people looked at, and then you hit the tadpole bound because this number is kind of fixed.
Sorry, I have a comment on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it has been checked in the sense that people know that for large construction moduli, it doesn't work. I mean, people have not found examples. It's very extremely hard, exponentially hard to find them.
Yes.
I mean, I think the conjecture is based on particular simple examples where you can, calculation to do it. But the absence of the Dennis-Douglas landscape as such, I don't think it has been demonstrated. It could still be, it could still hold in the very same way in which Dennis and Douglas conjectured it. It's still possible,
yes.
right?
I will provide pictorial evidence for some kind of this correlation in 2 Landau-Ginzburg models with, I think, 64 and 91 complex structure moduli. So this is one of the results.
Yeah, I agree.
We looked at 2 examples where there is some evidence for this, or maybe, but also some violation of this refined conjecture, which is kind of, I will come to at the end. But I agree, it's only some examples where people can do it.
To the level people were able to do a real search, which of course gives you many moduli, but not hundreds, say, okay? But up to 20, I don't remember what the number is. But people do find, to the extent calculation is possible at the moment, the vacuum. So I think the statement you made initially, that it is known due to many examples that the landscape as we envisioned it is not there. I think that is too strong.
Right. I didn't want to say it like this. I wanted to say it's known through many examples, and that Arthur is saying completely correctly. The examples are the examples we can do, and they are simple or have symmetries or have special properties usually. So we have not checked any generic things, so we don't really know. Yeah, very good.
I'm not debating your paper, your nice paper, and the claims there, but I'm just saying that one will be careful to rule out the Dennis Douglas results or claims, prematurely.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to claim anything. I just say there seems to be a correlation between the length of the fluxes and the number of fields you stabilize, which I don't know whether it's due to the examples we studied or whether there's something deeper. But I'll show you some examples later. Yeah. So for the refined version, the coefficient is actually 1/3. So if you have a flux that is bound, by a tadpole by 10, let's say, then you could stabilize 30 fields. If you have 20 flux, you can stabilize 60 fields, and so on. In F theory, however, Severin, Joseph, and the company, they kind of said in F theory when C is a factor of 1/4, so maybe instead of 1/3, which I kind of made up based on looking at the literature, maybe 1/4 could also be a factor here, and 1/4 is not overly constraining. And as Arthur said, maybe one finds counterexamples even to that if one studies generically. So yeah, here, I mean, as I said, Max and a whole lot of other people have worked on this from many different aspects and tested it and checked it, and there aren't many counter or any counterexamples, I think, to this very idea. Okay, so this brings me now to non-geometric Landau-Ginzburg models. So as I said before, they wanted to study moduli stabilization in type 2b. You can't really easily stabilize the scalar moduli, so they wanted to look at models where H11 is 0. And another motivation to do that is that this is kind of dual to the DJKT construction. DJKT studies a T6 mod Z3 times Z3 without complex structure moduli. So H2, 1 is 0, no complex structure moduli. And by mirror symmetry, that tells you there should be some kind of dual setup where H11 is 0. So mirror symmetry exchanges those two Hodge numbers, and the mirror dual would be a model with H110, and here they can stabilize our moduli. So naive expectation also in the dual model, we can do that. And there are actually two models they study. One is dual to T6 mod Z3 cross Z3. The other one is dual to T6 mod Z4 times Z4. Interestingly here, this is not a dual of DJKT just like that. It contains to some degree DJKT. The reason is that in type 2b, this Gukow-Witten superpotential, which we discussed before, it has the H flux, and under three mirror symmetry, three T dualities, if you believe SYZ, essentially you get F0, F2, F4, F6, but the H flux actually becomes H flux, geometric flux, and non-geometric Q and R fluxes. So the type 2b setting is dual to a DJKT setting with geometric fluxes, Q flux, and R flux. So it's in principle contains DJKT, but is more general and to some degree more powerful, I will argue. Yeah, so what these people do, they kind of work out all the hard stuff like where do these three planes go, what are O3 planes, what are fluxes, and what is the K-line, the superpotential. They discuss Suzy Minkowski and ADS vacuum. ADS vacuum are also very interesting here, but I'll only talk about Minkowski vacuum in this talk.
Sorry, Tim, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I imagine they discuss D3 branes and O3 planes as boundary conditions for the worldsheet, but how do they discuss fluxes?
So yeah, they kind of write down, so they write down a vertex operator using this Berkowitz hybrids formalism or something. Yeah.
Okay, so there's also like a worldsheet understanding of fluxes and their quantization.
Yeah, so it's not super specific, and I think Johannes said Qumran did most of this, so I don't know. They kind of identify the cycles that, I mean, you can identify cycles and such for the fluxes to be wrapped on, but I would say I'm not a super expert on this. Yeah. Okay, very good. So the above example here is dual to what I will call the 1 to the 9 Landau-Ginzburg model. That's what they study most and what we study most of the time, and other people too. It kind of denotes a product of our minimum models where R is 9 and K is 1. So that gives you central charge of 9. And then the other model is 2 to the 6 that we will also look at. That gives you the same central charge for the, the interesting thing here is that the first one allows only for a small number of O-planes, so you run into issues if you want to stabilize the fluxes because you have only 12 or 24 O-planes. This 2 to the 6 model has a much larger O3 plane charge, so that is more interesting, and that's why we wrote there or found more interesting things in our second paper. One thing I wanted to mention, just because Miguel asked me at strings or Irena, I don't remember, maybe Thomas Grimm, I don't remember. There is a factor of 4 that appears in K, and for our Minkowski vacuum, we will not use K later on. But the factor of 4 in K can either be argued for by mirror symmetry. So in type 2A, if you look at DJKT, they have a factor of 4 here. in front of the dilaton, then you can say, okay, the mirror symmetric setup should have the same Kähler potentials, the same kinetic terms. There should be a factor of 4. Alternatively, that's why I showed you before, this kind of volume, you can think of this orbifold that we do of this 1 to the 9 model as freezing this volume in string frame, leaving this factor of e to the -3 here unfixed, and that gives you then a factor of -4 here. So I believe there is a factor of 4 in K. It will not affect later on the result, but it's something people ask me about, and it's unclear. Maybe or was unclear to some people, how does a factor of 4 come about and what does it mean? So I believe there is a factor of 4. Now, there is some confusion that arises due to this factor of 4, and I did something wrong. So I think, well, I don't know. I think due to this factor of 4, you can check quickly the S duality is essentially broken. Before, type 2b S duality affects essentially the axiodilaton, and it transforms the superpotential and the Kähler potential in such a way that without the factor of 4, it's S duality invariant. Now you suddenly have a factor of -4 there, and then this paper said just do the calculation with the factor of 4. Obviously, it's not S duality invariant. So I thought somehow, okay, this breaks S duality in these settings. I don't really understand it. And then in our very first paper on this, we said S duality is broken. We find a whole slew of Minkowski vacua, an infinite family of Minkowski vacua. And then people said, oh, this shouldn't really exist in string theory. Are you sure this can't be right? These infinite families, they are related by S duality. So we looked at that closer, but I didn't know what to write in a paper that, okay, S duality seems to be broken, but they are related by S duality. Monkey Kim also pointed me to a paper that discusses higher loop corrections to K in n equals 2 model. So I don't know how to do it in n equals 1. I don't think anybody knows. So we can't really calculate higher order corrections or anything like that. But I think it is plausible that these ... dots takes a -3, and -3 with ... somehow becomes S duality invariant, and the -1 with the superpotential is S duality invariant. So from looking at this paper, it seems there is some completion in terms of an Eisenstein series that starts with a -3 and other stuff, but is in principle S duality invariant. So I think it seems plausible, but I can't calculate it because nobody can calculate it in n equals 1, the Kähler potential exactly. It is plausible that higher order corrections restore S duality, and then these infinite families of Minkowski vacua are related by SO2Z. Yeah. So I believe there might not be these infinite families, but I can't prove either way. That's why I haven't written a paper. Okay. Now, from now on, we completely forget about K, don't care about the factor of 4. We just look at Minkowski vacua, and we look at W equals 0 and DUAW equals 0. And we also look at the tau derivative. And then the usual statement goes through that you are used to from geometric compactifications. For W equals 0, we can't have 0,3. DUW, we can't have H1, 2. And D tau W, we can't have 3, 0. So that means our fluxes have to be 2, 1, and which is exactly the same in GKP. For ADS vacua, the fluxes do not have to be ISD because there's a factor of -4, and the factor of -4 changes things around. So that is a big difference that is discussed in some of the early papers in follow-up. But for Minkowski vacua, you just have the usual G3 in H2, 1 that you might be used to from GKP. Yeah. Okay. So now here the important point. Essentially, the statement is that the Gukov-Waffer-Witten superpotential is exact, and we do not need K. So K is not exact. Gukov-Waffer-Witten superpotential is exact, so we can actually calculate something. There are no corrections to that, and that's the only reason why you can trust Minkowski. Right? Minkowski, for the n equals 1, you would expect corrections to everything, and unless you know all corrections, which generically you cannot calculate, you cannot really make statements. So the first statement is that the alpha prime corrections are contained in the Landau-Ginzburg model in type 2b. So the alpha prime corrections are kind of baked into this Landau-Ginzburg construction, and we don't really have to worry about them. They are already included. The string loop corrections. So there was an early paper by Cliff Burgess and Fernando Quevedo and others that argued already that there should be no perturbative corrections to W in the string coupling. And then this original paper 06 kind of extended that to non-perturbative corrections to W. So they essentially argue in their paper that you can kind of generate the superpotential from domain walls of either D5 or NS5 branes. And then if you cross those, then F3 or H3 jumps by 1 unit. And the tension of these domain walls is non-renormalized. And then they provide some arguments where this was tested in holography and where the holography matches beautifully. And that would only be the case if the W is not renormalized.
Sorry, Tim, can I ask quickly? Could there be like that, instantons can contribute to the superpotential, no? Or the tension of the domain walls could be renormalized? I mean, plus one is too little Susie, so.
Sorry?
Sorry, I was asking two questions. So the first question was, how do we know for sure that in this exotic model that you're having, there are no other instantons, VPS instantons that could contribute to superpotential? And then secondly, how do we know that the tension of the domain walls remain exactly BPS?
Yeah, I don't know. So they argue in analogy to the regular D5 and NS5 brane. So it's a very good question, and this is kind of the question I invite. And I don't have the answer, just to disclose beforehand. But they essentially say these domain walls cannot be renormalized, and then they kind of, this is a geometric argument for the Bukov-Witten superpotential, and then they translate that into the Landau-Ginzburg language and say the same should go through here. So they
and what about instantons? Could there be? How do we know that?
Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
So this is the next slide. So essentially, you need half BPS things I will discuss on the next slide that could enter into the superpotential. I don't know. You probably know much more about this than me. Kumrun seemed somewhat confident, in particular also due to the test in holography. Somebody told me he's also thinking about it, whether there's an easier argument, maybe from the worldsheet or something like this, that the superpotential is not corrected. I don't know. I will tell you everything I know. So this is the argument essentially that the string loop corrections do not correct W, but they all go into K, and K we have no idea what it is. So having no string loop corrections to W, neither perturbative or non-perturbative, what about the instantons? So the standard D3 brane instanton in KKLT is the Euclidean D3 brane that shouldn't arise here because H11 is 0, so there is no 4-cycle that the Euclidean D3 branes can wrap. Then the question is, what about D-1 brane instanton? So we have D7, D3, D1, D-1 in steps of 4. Those are the standard half BPS objects. They argue in the original paper, they provide some arguments, but one argument is they say the D-1 doesn't really care about the volume. I mean, here's no volume, but let's assume before we orbifold, you just extend the volume to infinity. They are not there, and then you just compactify and do an orbifold. They shouldn't be there either. Yeah, that was one argument. What I liked is that is consistent with some results by Monkey. So Monkey said, and that's my understanding, I think it's correct, if you cancel locally the 077 brane charges, then there are no D-1 instantons. Here, there are no 07s because there are no 4 cycles. So H11 is 0, H22 is 0. And therefore, there are no O7 branes and there are no D7 branes. So since there is no 7 brane charge, it's kind of canceled locally. And then in those setups, Monkey also always found that there are no D-1 brane instantons correcting the superpotential. So it's more indication, yes, this might all be correct. It's not maybe a solid rigid proof or something. Yeah, okay, very good. But this is kind of the key and something maybe to think about more in the future. But for now, it seems we can study for the n=1 vacuum, and we can actually study them at strong coupling because there are no string loop corrections to W. So if I only study W, I don't have to worry about string loop corrections, and I can just go to strong coupling. And that allows us to actually study a kind of different corner of the string landscape, right? We can just work at coupling order 1. We can be at small complex structure. We are not at large complex structure. We are at small complex structure. We are at small string coupling. So error order 1 even. Yeah. So here, just for people who are like me, I worked my whole life kind of in the large complex structure limit. And usually the superpotential is some kind of polynomial that you get from the fluxes, maybe quartic even, but here cubic polynomial, you have cubic quadratic linear constant, and then you have some kind of suppressed, exponentially suppressed corrections to your superpotential. If you're in principle sufficiently powerful, you can calculate this full superpotential, and then you know everything. In practice, you never are if you have many moduli. But in principle, if you have only one modulus or something, you can calculate a closed form, you know everything, and then you're done. In practice, for more complicated models, you cannot do that. However, for the Landau-Ginzburg construction at the Fermat point, we can actually calculate the superpotential. So instead of taking this large complex structure limit where this is really large, we set this to whatever the value is at the Fermat point, and then we study fluctuations around the Fermat point. So at the Fermat point, UA is 0, and if we expand this U by plugging this in, what we get from here is a polynomial in UA, and from here we also get polynomials. So there are no exponential terms or an infinite series. Essentially, we get from here infinite series expansions in terms of these new moduli UA, and the minimum is at UA equals 0 for us, because that's how I defined the UAs. So if you now look at Minkowski vacuum, you want the W to be 0 at this UA equals 0 and DAUW equals 0. That tells you these first two terms have to vanish. And that can easily be accommodated. Whenever I choose H2,1 flux, we will find this is 0 and this is 0. So then we have a Minkowski vacuum. So just by choosing the fluxes, everything is consistent. There are no linear terms. Your superpotential starts with a quadratic term. The quadratic terms is what we are interested in, because the Hessian, the masses of this UA, is encoded in this second derivative. The masses here, full disclosure, involves the Kähler metric, and I will come back to that. However, we've proven previously, I mean, it's easy argument. The Kähler metric is a non-degenerate, sorry, my mouse disappeared. It's a non-degenerate metric, positive definite. It controls the kinetic terms. This is maximal rank. This is like maximal rank and all positive eigenvalues. That implies the number of massive fields as the rank of this matrix is the same as the rank of this matrix. So by just looking at these complex coefficients, you can determine how many fields are actually massive. You just look at the rank of this matrix, and that is the same as the rank of this matrix.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What is important is for these periods to use the right integral basis.
Yeah.
And so that periods do not vanish at the Fermat point. Integer linear combination of the two periods do not vanish at the Fermat point.
Sorry. One thing is,
like with fluxes, with the correctly normalized periods, don't vanish at the Fermat point because there is no, massless states coming there.
I'm not sure I totally understand. So they work out the correct quantization of the fluxes and the cycles in that paper. and provide the super potential. And then what we use as input is essentially any kind of flux, and then we can calculate this polynomial super potential order by order.
Yeah, but it doesn't start at 0, I think.
What do you mean? The W equals 0?
Yeah, the periods start with a constant, which is in general an irrational constant. So any kind of integral linear combination of them will never vanish.
So it's you're talking about the 4D space-time superpotential.
I'm just talking about the asymptotic behavior of the periods at the Fermat point. And they start with irrational constants. And so integral linear combinations of them do not vanish. And this corresponds, of course, that there's no physical singularity in the theory there. There are no massless states or something.
Well, so for us, there are massless states. I mean, essentially, it's a Gukov-Witten superpotential, which is G3 wedge omega. And if I choose G3 to be of 2,1 type, that is 0, right?
Yeah, G3 just adds an integer. Yeah, just gives integral linear combination.
Sorry, no, because okay, maybe that's a confusion. G3 is F3 minus tau H3, and tau is not an integer. Tau is irrational.
Okay,
yes.
Very good point.
So that is probably
then tau will take some irrational value.
Right, exactly. Okay. So tau needs to take on very specific values that are irrational. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Very good.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I just wanted to real quick tell you one or two things about stabilization versus massive fields. Trivial, but it becomes important here just for our work. So we all know like m squared phi squared, and if you take two derivatives, you find the math, and the potential looks like this. However, I didn't put any scales or anything on this axis. So if you had v of phi to the fourth, it would have looked exactly the same, and the field would have been stabilized. However, in that case, at 0, the m squared is the second derivative, is 12 phi squared, at phi equals 0 is 0. So we can have settings where fields are massless, but stabilized. And that can happen phi to the 4, phi to the 6, phi to the 8, phi to the 10, whatever. This concept translates into these Landau-Ginzburg models where we study the superpotential. So it is possible that higher order terms in the superpotential can actually lead to a stabilization of fields that are massless. So here in this case, we started working that out, and we found in some cases these terms vanish for some fields, so they are massless, but then these higher order terms actually stabilize them at some point. So what we want to do is we check the number of massive fields and the stabilized fields and see how that compares with the tadpole conjecture, and we want to see how that higher order stabilization works, which people haven't studied, and we want to see whether we can actually stabilize all fields and find isolated vacuum. So the 1 to the 9 has H2,1 63. You run into some computational issues. Here you have a billion terms. So here somewhere we were running out of computational power, but it was also insightful just to go there and see what happens. So let me discuss these results now in the last 15 minutes. To tell you what we found, and here I will mostly rely on pictures. So this is one particular example, the 1 to the 9. Disclaimer, they didn't want that necessarily for me to talk about it. The next one is cooler, but here we just get the logic, we see what's happening. So we have a huge number of moduli, and the question is how many can we stabilize? So if we can stabilize 64, we would want to be here up on the line. And then we see how does this compare to the charge induced by the flux F3 wedge H3. How much charge needs to be induced? The refined tadpole conjecture says alpha is 1/3. The refined tadpole conjecture says if I have very little flux, I cannot stabilize up here many fluxes, many fields. The refined tadpole conjecture says we have to be here. Yeah, because the more flux you turn on, the more fields you can stabilize. And what we did in this paper, mostly Katrin, thanks with her very powerful laptop computer, she generated a whole zoo of different fluxes. So all of these dots correspond to different fluxes. All these fluxes are in G2,1, but we have lots and lots of different choices. And here you see, actually, it kind of follows this line for whatever reason that we don't know, where there is some kind of diagonal line. The more flux we turn on, the more moduli we can stabilize, and somewhere here we can stabilize, I don't know, here maybe all fields without a problem. So that was very interesting. However, most or almost all of these solutions are unphysical. The orbifold, the orientifold only induces a charge of 12. So actually only these solutions are physical. All of these are non-physical. Nevertheless, they follow this kind of diagonal lines. That's why I said this might be interesting for mathematicians. Is there a relation? Why does this come out, this diagonal behavior? Is this maybe just a coincidence with a simple example? I don't know. But at least here there seems to be something happening. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in real quick to the physical solutions and discuss those before I go to the other model. So the physical solutions, they have either n-flux 8 and 14 stabilized fields, or they have n-flux 12 and 16, 18, 20, 22, or 26 fields stabilized, never 64. So somehow we had no idea what would come out, and originally I think that people thought maybe everything was stabilized because it was still before the tadpole conjecture. But it's actually not true. There are a lot of massless fields. So what we did now, we included higher order terms. So now turn on these higher order interactions, W3, 4, 5. So there are essentially the septic terms in the superpotential, sextic, cubic, and so on. And now you ask which fields get stabilized. And the answer is here, not a single other field gets stabilized. Same here and here. No more fields get stabilized. All these terms don't lead to any extra constraints on these fields that are massless. So we still have a huge number of massless fields in these models. However, interesting, for all these examples that didn't have too many stabilized fields, we found that at some order W3 or W4, things do get stabilized. So here we had 16 fields. If you include higher order corrections, you find suddenly 22 fields are fixed. So 6 fields are massless, but stabilized. Here 18 to 20, 20 to 22. There's a variety of different possibilities that happen. But so interestingly, you can stabilize massless fields at higher orders in these models. So here's kind of the summary. It seems like a nice confirmation of this 1/3. Seems to agree beautifully, like other examples before. It's impossible to stabilize all 64 moduli due to this 1/3. So the tadpole was 12. The best we could have hoped for is 36, and we only got 26. So instead of 36, we got 26 in physical models. And interesting, there was a paper by Katrin and Aninja where they tried to classify all possible flux configurations. So here the tadpole can only be 8 and maybe 12. Maybe there's something in between. And you can just try to list all possible fluxes with tadpole 8 and 12. For 8, they succeeded. For 12, it's still very hard. But it's just interesting that there exist models where you can potentially write down every single flux and you can study them completely. And what we found is that there are stabilized but massless fields for some flux choices. And this is kind of weird. I mean, we only went to 7th power in the superpotential, maybe at 10th power something else happens, but maybe there's also some reason. So there was this paper by Aaron Kumrun and Timo where they argued maybe if there's some symmetry, they can actually provide flat directions for n equals 1 as well. So this is something I'm curious about, but I haven't really studied, but I would like to look at in the future, maybe.
Tim, can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
So for some of the fields that remain massless up to order 7, imagine they were to remain exactly massless as in that paper. Do you know what would be for some of the examples in the infinite distance limit? So what kind of limits are they?
No.
Do you know?
No, I'm also not totally sure how the infinite distance. It's a good question. So the infinite distance limit, essentially we are expanding around this U equals 0.
Right.
So it's a power series that doesn't really terminate. I don't know how any of the infinite distance limits work and how to sum that up or even address
But
it.
it's like stretching the parent.
What are they doing to the? I mean, it's I don't know. It's just a complex structure modulus. I guess they deform something. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah. There must be like the torus, right? If you do a large complex structure, there must be some light states probably.
I'm trying to understand if this is an example where I would sort of like dedualize to have something which is like the compactification of its perturbative string.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. Okay, so now the most exciting stuff, the 2 to the 6 model. The 2 to the 6 model, you again want to ask what are the stabilized fields, what are the massive fields. And the interesting thing here is that the tadpole or the flux kind of is bounded by a much larger number. Instead of 12, we have 40. And the H2 plus 1 is 91. So if you multiply 40 by 3, you get 120. So in principle, this model could allow for 120 stabilized moduli, and you only need 90 if the tadpole conjecture is true as written. So yeah, this is what I just said. The refined tadpole conjecture would allow that. And then we went into the previous literature, and there were only 2 Minkowski vacua known. One had n flux 40, which is like right here and doesn't require 83 branes, and it had 51 stabilized fields, so there are 40 unstabilized fields, or 40 massless fields. And then the other one had only tadpole 16, and there were 34. So both of them are compatible with the refined tadpole conjecture. Both of them don't stabilize all the fields. So what to do? Katrin with Mariana paired up and their students, and they generated huge number of flux configurations and just looked at the massive fields. Well, I worked with Mutu and Aninja on looking at higher order corrections to this. So again, here is the same plot now for the 2 to the 6. The refined tadpole conjecture says you should be here. If it is correct, there's a 1/3. The maximum number we want to hit is here, and the tadpole would be here, so we can actually hit it. And this is a plot taken out of this paper, so they get all the credit. And here are all the results they found. And as you can see here, maybe I recircled it in the next one, there is a fully stabilized Minkowski vacuum. 40 n flux, there are no D3 branes required. The tadpole is completely canceled by the fluxes, and you have all 91 fields stabilized. There next to it, you can actually see there's 39, also one all stabilized. So you would need one D brane. But in principle, there seems to be isolated vacua, all 91 scalars are massive. So it's like M theory, just in 4D maybe. With Mutu and Aninja, we also found solutions. It's kind of surprising, but okay. We found 150 that all get us to 90. So you start to 90, you never get to 91. You start at 89, you go to 90. You start at 88, go to 90. You start at 87, go to 90. Start at 86, and you always go to 90 or less, except in 2 cases. So we studied hundreds of cases, and 2 actually take you from 86 to +5 to 91. So there are examples where there are 86 massive fields, and then there are 5 massless but stabilized fields via higher order cubic terms in the superpotential. So that's really cool. There are all these different examples. And now even cooler, there are violations of the refined tadpole conjecture. So this example, first of all, maybe there is some kind of diagonal line, but it's maybe not as clear in this example. There are examples that fall on it and thereby violated, but there are also examples above it. So I think this Mutu discovered, and all the other dots, the other people also discovered this one, but all the other ones are from the other paper. So it actually is within the 1/4 bound, but it's clearly above the 1/3 bound, which as Mariana said, it's just a number they chose that seemed compatible, but who knows, maybe it's 1/4. I wouldn't say it's super strong evidence, but I mean, it's somewhat tilted, and it indicates there might be a correlation, I would say. yeah, we also found examples where at massive level, you have massive fields that are below it, and they don't violate the refined conjecture. But once you add higher order stabilization, then you violate the refined conjecture. So you can also violate this conjecture at higher order. For all these examples, we haven't worked out higher orders. For this one, I think we have, and we didn't find anything to the order we went. But you could check in principle all of those. Maybe they also violate 1/4 at higher order. I don't know. It's the hard computational problem. Okay, so now as a warning, I just want to conclude the talk. I claim kind of we found the Minkowski vacuum, and maybe the renormalization of W is something I would like to understand better. But at least there are arguments that everything is in order and W doesn't receive perturbative or non-perturbative corrections, no instantons. However, there is another issue in these models. Usually, I would expect everything to be order 1. We are working at strong coupling. So the tau is, I think, √3 or 1/√3 or something like this. No. Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, so we work at strong coupling. It's something √3. It's an order 1 number. So I would expect that the Kähler potential and certainly these numbers in here that we extract, they are all order 1 numbers. So if you actually calculate the numbers, there is no suppression because of large complex structure. We're working at the Fermat point. There is no large complex structure. And there is no suppression due to weak coupling. So you would expect that all of this is order 1, but we cannot calculate it. So if it's all order 1, and then I calculate the eigenvalues of order 1 times order 1 times order 1, and then probably the masses are also order 1, which is a Planck scale, which is a string scale. So it is not like usual flux compactifications where I kind of say I forget about all the higher string states and everything. I just work in the low energy effective field theory, and then there's a hierarchy of masses. Maybe there is some miracle happening, but I wouldn't know where the hierarchy comes from. It's also not clear that just because there are other massive states, they would destroy these Minkowski vacuums. I wouldn't know why massive string states would kind of destabilize these fields or something or lead to a runaway. But it's at least something that is not clear to me. What are the masses? We can calculate them. I suspect they could be order 1. What does it mean? Should we worry? So that is kind of bringing me to the conclusion of my talk. The upshot is it seems we can study 4D n=1 Minkowski vacuum at strong coupling. It supports a modified refined Tadpole conjecture with a 1/4. Yeah, the first isolated Minkowski vacuum were found by Katrin, Mariana, and Seth's students. And we have some that have actually massless fields. If I put the citations wrong. So they found the only massive fields. We found some massless fields, but everything stabilized. And that's it. So thank you very much.